Taxation meeting will be called to order. We have a brief meeting today to get through. First item of business, as always, is going to be a request for bill introductions. I do want to go over, since this is our first meeting, a little bit about the bill introductions. Bill requests, and I'm guilty as anybody of this, I call it bill introductions. We don't actually introduce bills in committee. We make requests. They are introduced when they're taken to the floor and turned in and they receive their bill number. So we call this requests for bill introductions, but it is a request. If it's not introduced. But bill requests are handled under Rule 1304 of the Rules of the House, if you have a copy of those. The requests are recorded in the committee minutes, and because of that, we like to, well, we don't like to, that's in the rules. We need your name if you're introducing the bill. If you are introducing the bill on behalf of someone, please tell us your name and who you are introducing it on behalf of, an organization or a person. The RS number, which is the Revisers of Statutes number, before, that's how they track these bills, the language, before they get the actual bill number. And also the brief description of the summary or the content of the bill. No bill request is without prior authorization of the Speaker of the House. No bill request outside of the subject matter of this committee is to be entertained. Also, no bill requests without an RS number. We do require that RS number before they are introduced. So I think we will go ahead and open it up for bill requests, because I know we have one that is time sensitive. So Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm introducing RS 0087. It's a property tax exemption bill. Among the things being exempt are side-by-side ATVs, golf carts, electric bicycles, marine equipment. Last year, I introduced a constitutional amendment to be able to reduce the taxes on all these things because they're at like a 30% rate according to the Kansas Constitution, but the Attorney General's office says it would take a constitutional amendment to be able to reduce this tax, and basically the decision was basically made that it would just be easier to exempt all these things altogether from being taxed than it would be to try to pass a constitutional amendment. So that's just the reason for this, to try to make it easier.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Any objection on the request? If not, the request is approved. Are there any other requests? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have RS 0315. This would create a $250 tax credit for firefighters who incur unreimbursed medical expenses for cancer screenings with a cap of $1.5 million.
Okay, committee, are there any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Are there further requests for bill introductions? If not, I just have one. It's RS 25 RS 0336. We haven't hit the 2500s yet in the RS numbers, I hope. And it is a bill that will reduce property taxes by reducing the statewide mill levy from 20 to 18.5 and making that mill levy revenue neutral in future years. Are there any questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Didn't we reduce the property tax to 19.5 last year?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Helgerson.
Would you explain how you're keeping it revenue neutral?
We'll get to that when we get to the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Any objections? Seeing none, the request will be approved. Any further requests for bills? Yes. I don't think your mic is on. Is the light on? Okay.
Is that better?
Much better, yes.
I'm Sandy Braden, Braden Heidner Low, here on behalf of Poet, and would like to ask the introduction of a bill, 25 RS 0362, The content of the bill is that's an income tax credit for a total of 5 cents per gallon for ethanol sold, products sold by a retailer, a maximum of $5 million a year, and a sunset in 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? I'll just have a quick question. This is similar to the one we had last year that we did not have time to address, correct? Okay. Any objection, committee? Seeing none, the request is approved.
Thank you.
And I just about called you Representative Finch. My apologies for the demotion, but
I consider it just a promotion to being Citizen Finch, which is a pretty good gig. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My request for your request for a bill introduction is 25 RS 0096. It creates parity by eliminating the sales tax on cable, community antenna, and television services in the state of Kansas.
thank you. Committee, any further questions? Any objection? Seeing none, the request will be approved. Thank you. Any further requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, I will jump into, since I accelerated that ahead of where I was planning on being in the committee process here, but we do have some new members to the legislature and new members to the tax committee, so I just briefly wanted to go through the bill request procedure for those that may not have experienced this before, but you know, your bill drafts really begin with a legislator making a request to the revisor's office. That's when you begin putting the language together and drafting the bill. After you get that language kind of tweaked the way you like it, then you can either come to the committee and make the request, as you just saw that we did here. It then becomes a committee-sponsored bill. You can also run that as an individual bill. You don't have to bring it to the committee to introduce it. You can take it directly to the House clerk and introduce that as an individual bill. There are deadlines. Pay attention to the legislative calendar. There are deadlines when you have to have those turned in before they will no longer accept those. The revisor, as you heard, will provide an RS identification number. House bills will have an HB number in front of them once they're public and official. RS numbers are not public. You can't look those up anywhere to my knowledge, or that I've been able to find out anyway. So that RS number, when it's being developed, is only released to you if you are drafting that, and it is private and secure. Is not made public unless you make it so by providing that information to others. The bill, as I said, can be introduced in committee or in the chamber as an individual bill. What happens after the committee process, if you've never been a chairman before or a vice chair, after these bills that have been requested will usually come up to the floor tomorrow or within the next few days. Generally, sometimes there's even further tweaks that need to be made and adjusted after they've been requested. But the chair or the vice chair will then turn it into the clerk, and then that day those bills will be read in, introduced, and receive the bill number. After that, we still can't schedule a hearing on the bill until the bill that's been introduced has been then referred to a committee. So we had a situation where we've got a bill that's been pre-filed. Pre-filed bills are individual bills that have already been introduced. House Bill 2004, Representative Francis introduced a bill, and it went to his committee, and he didn't want it, so he gave it to us. No, I'm kidding, but it is a tax bill. It got referred to the Transportation Committee in error, so we will get that referred back. I could not schedule that for a hearing officially until we get that in our committee, but you'll see when I go over the schedule for next week, we will have that hearing, but the committee technically doesn't have that bill yet, so we can't do anything with it, take action on it, have a hearing or anything until it gets referred to the tax committee. So with that, we'll go back to our welcome and introductions in the original line of what I had on the agenda here. I think I'll start first by introductions, and I'd like to start with staff first. If legislative research would like to start, we'll do the center table here, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves as the committee members.
My name is Eddie Pinner with Legislative Research, starting my 12th session with the legislature.
Eric Adele with Legislative Research. This is my 4th session.
Leah Gerard, Committee Assistant. I've been here 12 years and 8 with tax.
And for any of the new members, Leah is the committee assistant. If you have any testimony or if you have any questions, she's really the one that runs the committee. So I could not do this job without her. She does an excellent job. But to all of our conferees, the public and the committee members, Leah is the connection that makes all the magic happen.
Tanner Lassiter, audiovisual team, and this is my 2nd year of session.
Amelia Kovar Donahue. I'm an assistant revisor, and this is my 7th session and my 7th session with the House Taxation Committee.
Adam Siebers, excuse me, Adam Siebers, Revisor's Office. This will be my 13th session.
And for what I said, for Leah, these staff members, we could not do this work without their help, the information and the resources that the research department provides, the legal expertise that the revisors offer us. We really owe them a debt of gratitude for how efficiently the committee works and how well and smoothly things run at times. So I'd like to start off with my vice chair and then my ranking member, and then we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carl Turner. I'm in House District 28, which is Johnson County, half Leawood, half Overland Park. I've been on tax committee every year I've been in chamber, and though I'm starting my 3rd session now, but the chairman does a great job of running this committee. It's an inclusive process. I know we pull up spreadsheets and rack up numbers and do stress testing on it, and it's just a good committee. Everybody contributes. I was looking around. I think we only have one member, Representative Wolf, that's actually new to the legislature. Otherwise, some of the folks are new to this committee, but looking forward to working with everyone. So thank you.
Tom Sawyer. I represent the 95th District of Wichita, which is the Delano area of Wichita. I'm familiar with Wichita. I got sworn in for the 17th time yesterday. Lots of swearing. Yeah, been here a while. But I will agree with the comments made by the vice chair. I think that the chair does a good job running this committee, and it's a good committee to be on. We do work together and try to improve the lives of everyday Kansans.
Thank you. Now, Representative Carlin, I think we'll start down there and go around the horseshoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sydney Carlin, State Representative from Manhattan. It's the 66th District. I am returning to Tax Committee after a long time on appropriations, and I am starting my 12th session. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hi, Representative Stephanie Clayton, House 19, parts of Prairie Village, Overland Park, and Leawood. Happy to be back on tax again, I think for my 3rd term, and this is my 13th session.
Henry Helgerson from Wichita.
Tom Kessler from District 96, which is in South Wichita. This is my 5th year on tax.
Rishu, House District 25, which is a bunch of small cities up in Northeast Johnson County. This is my 1st year on tax. Take it easy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick Hoeisel, 97th District, Southwest Wichita. This is my 3rd year on tax, and this is my 3rd committee of the day, and I said it in the first 2 committees. I'll say it here as well. I asked to be off this committee and removed, and here I am again, back on this committee, so looking forward to getting to work.
John Alcala, the 57th District, Northeast Shawnee County. I came up to the Kansas House in 2012, but after this session, I've been an elected official for 34 years.
Jerry Stogstall. I represent the 21st District in Johnson County, representing most of Prairie Village and Overland Park, and this is my 7th year on tax committee.
Hi, I'm Shannon Francis. I represent the 125th District, which is in Southwest Kansas, the towns of Liberal, Kismet, and Plains, and I'm beginning my 11th year.
Chuck Smith, District 3, Pittsburgh, Chicopee, just a small area right around Pittsburgh. Nick, I asked to be on this committee, so Leader, I'm really thankful to be on here, so thank you.
I'm Mike Thompson, District 33, Southern Wyandotte County, includes Bonner, Edwardsville, and then goes into Turner over to 635. This is my third session. Thank you.
Hello, Robin Essex. I represent District 78, which is Southern Olathe. I also did not ask to be on this committee, but I'm excited to be here. Lots to learn. First year. Here we go.
Hi, Marty Long from District 124 in the southwest corner of the state. This is my 5th year in the legislature, first year on tax, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. Dawn Wolf, represent rural Kansas at its finest. Have part of Saline County, a little bit of Salina, but other than that, Ottawa, Cloud, and Mitchell. So we're pretty rural, and I've been a commissioner for 6 years, so I don't know taxation, but I do know how to impose taxes on people.
Hi, Cindy Howerton. This is my 4th term. I successfully avoided tax my first 2 and got assigned here, mainly because I spent 21 years managing tax offices, but I'm happy to be back.
Francis Averkip, represent the 61st District, which is Potawatomi County, more the rural part of it, and Jackson County, the southwest corner, including Holton. It's my 9th year in the legislature, 5th year on tax, and this was my first preference on which committee I wanted to be on, Mr. Chairman. Looking forward to another 2 years. Thank you.
Clark Sanders, I'm from Salina. I represent the 69th District. My district is all in Saline County. It's 10 precincts in the city and 10 townships in the county. I came into the legislature in 2021 and have been on this committee from the get-go, and I'm happy to be back.
Well, my name is Adam Smith, and Representative Hoheisel, I too asked to be off of this committee. No, I'm kidding. So apparently we're in the same doghouse, but no, I represent the 120th District in Northwest Kansas, and for those of you who have been paying attention, we have a pretty good cross-section of representation on this committee. Eastern Kansas, Western Kansas, North, South, rural, urban. We have a lot of folks with a lot of local government experience, whether that is in county, a lot of former county commissioners, city council, even school board and township folks. I believe that gives people an excellent preparation. So even if you might be new, you have a lot of understanding about setting tax policy and setting budgets. I think that really helps you hit the ground running when you're in the legislature and especially in this committee. So I appreciate the background and that each and every one of you has to bring to the table here and the experience. And it's because of that this committee works so well together to really work through our tax policy and produce the best product, in my opinion. I really want to stress a few things. I should have done this at the beginning, but you want to be careful on your microphones. If that light is on, you do have a hot mic. Sometimes the room itself doesn't pick things up, but it's always picked up online. We have certain situations here and there where things are said offline that are really online, so I want you to be aware of that. The little blue light on your mic, if that is on, you are being broadcast across the entire world, so be careful of that. Do also want to remind everyone, please turn your cell phones off or put them on silent. I will neither confirm nor deny that I have the vice chair occasionally text or call folks of the committee. No, I'm kidding. Maybe, just to see if they're off. Would also like to address some of the things that are in the committee rules. The boundaries, this is a pretty big committee room. It's one of the largest in the State House, but occasionally does fill up, and we do ask that the press and members of the public, if you're taking pictures or in the audience, you respect the end of the desks. We don't want you interfering with any of the legislators or business that they're trying to do, so we respectfully ask that you keep any cameras or recording devices or anything to the east of the end of the desks here. We want to keep information that may be on computers or cell phones or information that's in front of the legislators, if that is private information, does not need to be recorded or taken a picture of. I had a few things I was going to talk about regarding really COMA and CORA, the Open Meetings and Open Records Act, but our revisor does a much better job of that, so I'm going to leave that for him. He's going to be talking to us next week about that and going over that. As far as meeting attendance is concerned, I would ask that you let me know if you're going to be absent. We'll do an excused absence. It's not really as critical these days when we're just getting into bills and even some hearings. If you do want to participate in the meeting, you have to be here. There is the option to join in on WebEx and ask questions. However, we cannot vote over WebEx, so once we begin working bills, your attendance here would be required, and if you cannot make it, let me know so we can get a substitute person in, so we make sure we have a good full committee on the votes. I think that's all I really had. The last thing I wanted to go over is not every committee in the State House is like this, so we are all electronic. And I'm going to share my screen here, and just to make sure everybody is familiar with that, we'll see if this works. And I may not know what I'm doing here, but okay, there we go. If you're bringing your laptop to the committee, the S drive, if anybody's unfamiliar with that, if you come down here to your, that's not going to show there, is it? Do I have to share my screen a different way? See if I can close my WebEx. There we go. There we go. There's a little bit of a lag there. I'm kind of messing up. Okay, when you get into your network drive, if you come down to your network, it should show, you can't really see that super well. I don't know if I can zoom in on that or not. Nope, that didn't work. It's called 4 Committees. You'll double click on that, and this is where all the testimony, all of the committee rules, all the information will be. We'll go under House Committees. And we will be down at Taxation. And all of the information for this year, that should be the folder containing all the information for today's topic. These folders will be populated usually around 12 o'clock the day of the committee meeting. So if you want to do a preview and kind of read through some of the testimony before our committee meeting, you have that availability. Leah always tries to get that up around noon. Unless there's some testimony that comes in late, there might be some changes that are made, but the bulk of that information will be there and ready for everyone. Since we are paperless, all of the information is there. If for some reason that's a problem, visit with me and Leah, and we'll try to get you hard copies if that's what you would prefer. But without that, we are all paperless in the committee. I think that pretty much covers, we have the rules. I think, are they uploaded on the S drive? Yes, we do have. We do have copies of the rules. We have 2 sets of rules, one for the committee and then one for the conferees, people that are submitting testimony. So those are available for your review on the S drive. They're very similar to what we had in prior years. There were some edits. They're trying to standardize all the committees to have the exact same committee rules. And they went in and edited some of the COVID. There were still some rules in there that kind of pertained to procedures during the COVID years. we'd like to put that behind us. So we're updating the rules a little bit. So those are available for your review on the S drive with that information from today. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Edward Penner with Legislative Research to give us an overview on the consensus revenue and tax facts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Within that S drive folder for today's meeting, there are 3 documents that our office provided, and I'll go over those in order. The first of those is what we refer to as the long memo. It includes the state's consensus revenue estimates for fiscal year 2025 and 2026. The second of those is a shorter, just 2-page memo that details the state general fund receipts for the fiscal year to date through the end of the month of December. And then the final one of those is the 2024 supplement to the 9th edition of Kansas Tax Facts, which is a publication that our office has been producing since the early 1960s. To start with the long memo, that is a 10-page memo. It includes both the economic forecast for the state for the coming years and also the revenue forecast for the state general fund for the current fiscal year and one following fiscal year. I'm going to primarily be presenting the revenue forecast, which is found on tables 1 and 2 at the back of that memo. I will just very briefly mention the economic forecast as I wrap up the revenue forecast, though. So table 1 details the actual receipts for fiscal year 2024 with the November revisions to the estimates for fiscal year 2025 and the newly issued estimate for fiscal year 2026. The revised estimate for fiscal year 2025 was reduced by $59.8 million relative to the prior estimates, or 0.6%, to $9.73 billion. This represents a decline of $408 million, or 4.0%, relative to the final 2024 receipts. The taxes only portion of the general fund receipts was reduced by $72.2 million and now represents a decline of $354 million, or 3.5%, relative to the prior year. Tax policy changes account for more than 100% of the year-over-year decline, and we would see anticipated revenue growth were it not for those various tax policy changes. I'll highlight just a few of those really quickly. The food sales tax, of course, was reduced for the final time to 0% for the state rate on January 1st. And so this year we have 6 months of 2% and 6 months of 0%, whereas last year we had 6 months of 4% and 6 months of 2%. Last year during the regular session, the legislature enacted tax bills with a total of $67.9 million of reduction in SGF receipts. And during the special session, enacted a tax bill with reduced SGF receipts of $416.3 million. Additionally, this year, fiscal year 2025 represents the first year where we have a full year of the corporate rate reduction attributable to the Apex project. And it also represents the first kind of tranche of those investment tax credits associated with the Panasonic Apex project. So in terms of our specific tax source estimate revisions for fiscal year 2025, and this can be found on table 2, we actually revised upwards the individual income tax estimate by $113.8 million. We revised downwards the corporation income tax estimate by $211.5 million, and we revised the sales and use tax estimates upwards by a combined $47.1 million. We did revise our non-tax receipt estimates upwards by $12.4 million. That was primarily driven by upward revisions to agency earnings, which are largely unclaimed property receipts. For fiscal year 2026, and this is back on table 1, the initial estimate was set at $9.845 billion, which represents an increase of $114 million, or 1.2%, over the newly revised fiscal year 2025 estimate. We are projecting growth of about $200 million, or 4.7%, in individual income tax. Part of that growth is attributable to a smaller fiscal impact from the special session tax bill. You might recall that that tax bill included retroactivity to the beginning of tax year 2024. And so the fiscal year 2025 impact includes all of tax year 2024 as well as a portion of tax year 2025, whereas the fiscal year 2026 impact includes just a portion of 25 and then the offsetting portion of 2026. And so there's more than a full year's impact on that first year, which results in a larger first year fiscal note. And then it drops down to a more annualized level beginning in fiscal year 2026. We are projecting growth of $10 million or 0.7% in corporation income tax. This growth would be larger, but we're anticipating the second tranche of Panasonic Apex investment tax credits kind of coming online in that year. And the second and third tranches of those are anticipated to be larger than the first tranche just because of the construction timeline of that project. Sales and use tax are estimated to grow at combined $5 million or 0.1%. This is partially attributable to the full year of food sales tax being at 0% and the full year of the disposition of revenue percentages changing. On January 1, in addition to food going down to 0%, we did once again update the percent of sales and use tax receipts that go to the state highway fund as opposed to the state general fund. That went from 17% to 18% on January 1 that went to the highway fund. Beginning in fiscal year 26, we'll have a full year of that as well, in addition to the full year of the food going down to 0%. However, we do want to highlight that the growth in sales and use taxes is tempered by the kind of continued long-term shift in the economy from purchases of generally taxable goods to generally untaxed services. This is, of course, a trend that has been happening for a very long time in the economy. It's not unique to Kansas. But during the COVID years, there was somewhat of a reversion of that trend where people spent more of their money, relatively speaking, on taxable goods and less of their money on untaxed services. And prospectively and in the current times, that trend seems to be reverting back to what had previously been kind of the long-term trend. Other than those taxes, we are forecasting a decline of non-tax revenue of $99.4 million. This is largely attributable to reduced interest earnings. That happens on both sides of the interest earnings equation. The interest earnings is, in essence, the amount that we have available for investing to generate interest combined with the interest rate that we're earning. In light of the fact that the state is currently spending more than it brings in on the state general fund, we anticipate the balance, the available amount of money to decline, and also the interest rates we anticipate to decline during the forecast period relative to where they are today. So with that being said, I would just touch really briefly on the economic forecast for the state. At our November meeting, we did modestly reduce that forecast. Both inflation and real gross state product for Kansas are now forecasted to be lower in all three of the relevant calendar years than they were prior to our November meeting. We revised inflation expectations downwards by an average of 0.3% across the three relevant calendar years, those being 24, 25, and 26. And we revised our real growth expectations down by 0.1% on average across those 3 years. And so our nominal gross state product, which is kind of the single most important variable in terms of the impact on state receipts, is now been revised downwards from 5.4% to 4.7% for calendar year 2024, from 4.7% to 4.4% in calendar year 2025, and from 4.4% to 4.2% in calendar year 2026. So those are all downward revisions, but pretty modest downward revisions. And with that, I would stand for questions on this first memo before pivoting to the next item.
Thank you, Eddie. Committee, are there any questions? I guess you answered the one question sort of I had at first written down here. That second Apex project, those provisions don't actually take effect until the project is certified. Do you know where we're at in that process?
Yeah, at this point, there is not going to be a second Apex project. The Integra project, if it comes to fruition, is not going to come to fruition as an Apex project. And the Apex statute is closed. The deadline for that is in the past. So there's not going to be a second Apex project. There's not going to be a second corporation rate reduction attributable to Apex. And that is incorporated into these estimates. And the November estimate is the first time that we did fully incorporate not having a second Apex project as a part of our expectations.
Okay, that was my concern. Was I didn't know if the deadline meant meant the application period or the certification period. So I didn't know if that had expired or if that's something that could still happen out there. The other question I had was on the interest. Our budget stabilization fund, is that statute, I don't serve on appropriations, I'm not sure, does the interest from that fund, is it reinvested in that fund? I mean, it goes back into that fund, it's not available for SGF, is that correct?
Yeah, the interest on the budget stabilization fund stays with the budget stabilization fund. It doesn't come to the SGF. And so if you look at our multi-year profiles, you actually see the balance of the budget stabilization fund growing by a relatively small amount, but not negligible amount every year. And that growth is just the interest for that fund.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions for Eddie? Seeing none, please continue.
From there, I would pivot on to the two-page memo that is provided for you on the S Drive, and that is our state general fund receipts from July through December. It might be beneficial for the people who are new to the legislature or new to the tax committee if I actually take a step back and speak really briefly on what the consensus revenue estimating process is. Kansas, since at least 1975, has used a consensus or joint revenue estimating process under which KLRD on behalf of the legislature and the division of the budget on behalf of the governor jointly agree to our expectations for the state's revenues. This affords some benefits to the state, namely that when you're discussing public policy, both the legislature and the governor are on the same page in terms of what the cost or benefit to the state might be. At the federal level, the Congressional Budget Office and the executive branch's Office of Management and Budget sometimes have different numbers, and even the exact same policy is projected to have different impacts by the two branches of government. That wouldn't work very well at a part-time legislature at the state level, and so it works well for the state to have the agreement between the executive branch and the legislative branch in terms of our revenue expectations. And so twice a year, statute provides for the director of the budget and the director of legislative research to jointly agree upon the general fund revenue expectations. There is a statutory provision provides for if they were unable to arrive at consensus, but that's never happened in the history of the process, and we certainly hope it never does happen. And so those revenue estimates take place in the month of November and in the month of April. The statutory deadlines are actually December 4th and April 20th. We don't actually learn a lot about state receipts between the middle part of November and December 4th, and so we make the fall estimates usually in mid-November, so that we're not trying to have to schedule around the Thanksgiving holiday and travel as it relates to that. However, in the month of April, we are learning quite a bit about state receipts on a day-to-day basis, since that's kind of the height of tax filing season, and so we do tend to try to have that meeting as close to April 20th as possible. This year it will be held on Thursday, April 17th, with the 20th falling on a Sunday, and it being Easter Sunday, we're having it on the Thursday of that week. After we arrive at those agreements, we then do chop those full year's agreements into 12 monthly estimates. However, I want to clarify that we don't invest near as much time and we don't expect as much precision in those monthly estimates as we do on the full year's estimates. They're just kind of designed to be guideposts to help us in tracking the estimates. And so if you see us being ahead or behind on a month-to-month basis, of course that's relevant for you, and I wouldn't discourage you from looking at those memorandums, but I do want to caution that not as much time and energy goes into making those monthly estimates as goes into making the annual estimates, so probably don't put as much stock in them. Obviously, as estimators, our goal is to have a margin of error of 0 on every estimate every month. Of course, that doesn't happen. And so we want to be as close to 0 as possible, which means on a month-to-month basis, we kind of like to see it be positive one month, negative the next, positive 1 month, negative the next, where it hopefully is coalescing towards the actual estimates as we get towards our next revision of the estimates. So what you have in front of you is the update through the month of December, and total receipts through the month of December were $65 million, or 1.4% ahead of the estimates. The tax receipts through December were $41.4 million, or 0.9% ahead of the estimates. And I mentioned we kind of like to see it go back and forth and hopefully coalesce towards 0. Just so you know, the month of November, we were behind the estimates at that point in time. And so it's not unusual for this to kind of flip back and forth from month to month. Of course, it's also not unheard of for it to be consistent month to month, where the year-to-date estimate grows in one direction or the other. Looking more closely at the individual tax sources, individual income taxes were 16.2 million ahead of the estimate. Corporation income taxes were 39.5 million ahead of the estimate. Sales and use taxes combined to be 15.5 million behind the estimate. The other taxes combined to be less than $1 million behind the estimate, and the non-tax revenue was $23.6 million ahead of the estimate. That $23.6 million, though, does have a certain amount of one-time noise in it as it relates to state interest earnings and state net transfers, actually specifically related to the budget stabilization fund interest and the way that was being accounted for in the state's accounting system. So I wouldn't anticipate that to continue to grow. I do want to highlight for people who are new to the tax committees that December is, of course, a very important month as it relates to corporation income taxes, because that's when corporations make their final estimated payment for the month. That final estimated, or excuse me, for the calendar year. That final estimated payment for individuals is made in the month of January, and so January does tend to be a more important month as it relates to individual income tax receipts, where a less important month as it relates to corporation income tax receipts. Of course, all of that can kind of pale in comparison to the swings that we can have in the months of March, April, and May at the height of tax filing season. But those quarterly estimated payments are still more important than just an average month. And so with that, I would happily stand for any questions on the year-to-date receipts as they relate to the estimates.
Thank you, Eddie. Committee, any questions? If not, Eddie, one of the things that I've been watching cautiously is we have a lot of, throughout the special session, we passed a bill that had a lot of changes to income tax, and it was more than just simply changing a few rates. We made a large increase in the personal exemption. We kind of restructured that personal exemption language. One of the things, how soon will we be able to realize the true impacts of that? I mean, we can try to predict and speculate on how these tax returns will be coming in. Will we have a pretty good idea prior to that April date as people begin filing early to see exactly how that's all played out? Because we simply don't know what we don't know, and I'm just curious if there might be potential ramifications there that we didn't anticipate.
We may have a good idea is kind of the short answer, but we also may not. What we'll be closely monitoring is the number of returns that have been filed with the state and kind of the average size of refunds or balance due payments, specifically in relation to current years, and kind of how those project as it relates to our receipts. However, the reality is that the magnitude of those changes and the fact that some of those changes are going to pivot people from people who historically would have made a balance due payment in mid-April to people who would suddenly be entitled to a refund. Will that change their behavior in terms of getting their returns in earlier in filing season? So we're kind of bracing for, February might be a worse month in terms of state receipts, obviously a good month for taxpayers getting their refunds back, but a worse month for the state in terms of receipts than we've really kind of ever seen, maybe if we do see taxpayer behavior change in accordance with those tax changes. And another thing that does add a certain amount of complication to trying to track through that relates to the withholding tables that go along with that change. Of course, those were provided for by the Department of Revenue in early July after the June passage of the legislation. However, when employers actually made their changes to their payroll systems to account for those withholding differences varies throughout the state. A lot of the larger third-party administrator processors do those updates on a quarterly basis, not on a real-time basis or even a monthly basis. So a lot of those probably didn't implement those new withholding tables until October 1st in all likelihood for some of those. And so there's a lot of noise as it relates to the withholding that we've actually already received. Was it withholding under the old law, withholding under the new law? We're not really sure. And then adding to the confusion of that is that Kansas taxpayers, of course, when they fill out their K4 form, they can elect to have no exemptions claimed whatsoever. And many taxpayers may do that. The form provides for if you want to ensure that you're not under withheld to claim no exemptions. Because of the way the restructuring of the tax system was done through the personal exemption amounts, for taxpayers who elect to have no exemptions claimed on their withholding, in many cases, their withholding actually may have gone up once the new withholding tables were in place, because of course, offsetting that big increase to the personal exemption amount was an increase to the lowest marginal rate. And so people who have no income exempted from withholding by virtue of their K-4 actually may have seen their withholding go up at the time when the new withholding tables were implemented. And of course, the challenge for us is that we at the state level, we have no idea what the actual K-4s say. That's retained by the employers. And so we don't know how widespread that phenomenon might be, but we do know that it exists in some form or fashion out there. So we'll just be very closely monitoring it throughout filing season is the tricky reality there.
Yeah, and I know of some examples in that K-4 explanation that I'm aware of that people didn't realize how much that would impact their withholdings. And like I said, that's why I'm watching this cautiously, because we need to see how all this plays out with those changes that we did make. So, committee questions, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I'm clear on this, do you make an actual estimate of tax revenue expectations month by month, or do you just do it for 6 months or for a year and then the average is month to month?
So at our main meeting, we estimate the full year amounts. A few days later, we reconvene and then chop that up into 12 individual, in certain, it's actually not ever 12, because when we reconvene after our November meeting, we of course chop it up into 8 remaining pieces that for the remaining 8 months of the year. The first 4 months are actuals at that point. And then after our April meeting, we reconvene and chop it up into 3 remaining estimates. So we do have estimates for those 12 months that our office and the governor's division of the budget agree to as a part of the consensus process. And that's what is reflected in the estimate column on the one-page memo there. So we do have those, yes. I just want to be clear that we invest more time and energy in trying to get the full year's estimates correct than we do the 12 chopped up pieces.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Seeing none, let's
All
go
right.
ahead and move on.
From there, the final document that you have is the 2024 supplement to the 9th edition of Kansas Tax Facts. Tax Facts is a publication that our office has been preparing since the early 1960s. And we produce a new full edition of it about once a decade or so. And then typically on an annual basis in between those full editions, we prepare supplements to that, which basically amount to data updates relative to all of the information in there. And so we produced a full edition of this last year in 2023, which is quite a bit longer than the 9 or 10 page data update that you have here. It's somewhere in the 70-page range. This just updates the data tables and also provides certain kind of tax highlight information from the previous year, both in terms of receipts and policy. But I am going to specifically focus on the tables as we work through here. And so if you turn to the page, what is paginated as page 2, if you're looking at a PDF, I believe it's going to be the 4th page of the PDF of that. That gets you to table 1, which is the summary of state and local total taxes in Kansas, kind of sorted by tax type. You can see for fiscal year 2024, those totaled to $20,759.8 million. The largest single one of those was the general property tax. It was back on top in 2024 after having been behind both sales and use and income and privilege taxes in both fiscal years 2022 and 2023. You can also see that those 3 taxes, the general property tax, the sales and use tax, and the income and privilege taxes, they sum to be about 90% of the total state and local taxes. And they tend to be pretty close to each other, at least in recent years, in terms of magnitude of those 3. For the longest time, I believe since statehood, general property had always been the single largest tax, and I believe fiscal year 2022 was the first time in which it was passed and was not the largest tax. In 22, both sales and use and income and privilege were larger than it, and that continued into 2023 before reverting back in 2024. Those three making up 90% of the state's revenues, each being about 30%, is of course where the phrase three-legged stool comes from as it relates to tax policy in Kansas. On the next page, you can see Table 2, and that is where we have the state and local taxes broken out into, rather than tax type, broken out into state on the one side and local on the other. So state tax receipts were about $12.2 billion, which makes up just below 60% of the total, and local tax receipts were $8.6 billion, which makes up just more than 40% of the total. You can, and that ratio tends to be about the same. We have a long-term trend of the state share of the state and local total growing, but over the last 2 years, local taxes have actually grown at a higher rate than state receipts, and so it's kind of flipped on its head for the last 2 years, and it's veered a little bit back towards local government. The other thing that is probably worth highlighting here is that state tax receipts do tend to be much more volatile than local tax receipts. You can see that we have 1 year where they're up 21.9%, and that immediately trails on a year where they're down 4.5%. And that's true kind of through the long history of state tax receipts, them being a bit more volatile, whereas local tax receipts, you see a much more steady year to year. It tends to grow almost every year, but the growth ranges from 2 to 6.5%, and it tends to be very steady within that range. That's due to kind of two reasons. One of those is a function of which taxes are actually levied by the state government versus the local units of government. Local units are primarily financed by property tax, which tends to be a much more stable tax. And the other reason is actually kind of the work of this committee, is what I would say, and the work of its corresponding committee in the other chamber. The state revisits more differing aspects of its tax policy on an annual basis than local governments do. One of you mentioned service on a local unit of government, and of course the local unit by and large visits its tax rate on an annual basis, or really the tax dollars. It doesn't get into, and it doesn't actually usually have statutory authority to get into tax base type issues and tax policy and tax incentive type issues the way that you all do. From there, I would pivot on to Table 3, and Table 3 is the detailed breakdown of state tax receipts. And so this is the very precise amount. You can see that the single largest one of these, the individual income tax, was at $4.52 billion, and you can see down here that the cereal malt beverage tax still did generate $90,000 in the state last year, although that wasn't quite the smallest. The combative arts tax generated $21,000, and so this gets all the way down into the weeds of kind of every tax that we have at the state level. And you can see the income and privilege, of course, kind of are the single largest piece for the state at almost $6 billion. Sales, use, and excise, both the general sales and use taxes and also those special excise taxes that we have on liquor and tobacco products and a few other things, make up about $5.4 billion. We have about $500 million of gross receipts taxes, which are largely the insurance premiums taxes. We have about just a little under $100 million in state property taxes, which are largely the 1.5 mills for the 2 state building funds. And then we do have the unemployment compensation taxes, which are a payroll tax. In the most recent year, those are $230 million. So you can see, all told, you get to about $12.2 billion for the state. Table 4 details the allocation of those funds to either the state general fund or kind of all other funds. You can see, of course, that the state general fund receives 82% of the total state taxes, and 18% goes to other funds. The single largest of those other funds are the highway funds that the state has, and then also the unemployment compensation, the unemployment trust fund, and also some of the insurance premiums tax goes to a special fund that is utilized to finance the state's Medicaid program. So those kind of make up the lion's share of those other funds. Obviously, a handful of them have very specific other funds that they go to. From there, I would pivot on to Table 5, which is kind of the same sort of detailed breakdown, but it's for the local taxes as opposed to the state taxes. And so this table splits it out both by tax type and also by local government type. You can see that the schools throughout the state are the single largest taxing local government with just under $3 billion. The counties are next in line with about $2.8 billion. Cities are third at $2.1 billion. Those three together are, of course, the lion's share of local taxes. Special districts levy about $600 million, and the townships throughout the state a little over $110 million. Looking down at the bottom, you can see it's split out by tax type. Tangible property makes up about 74.1% of all local government taxes. Sales and use taxes make up about 19.4%. The vehicle taxes make up about 5.5%, and everything else, which is by and large the intangibles tax, the transient guest tax, and then a little bit of motor vehicle registration tax, things like that, make up about 1% of the total local government tax receipts in the state. And then the final page of this document is kind of a historical perspective as it relates to state taxes. You can see this reaches back all the way to 1930, when the general property tax made up in excess of 80% of the total state and local tax revenue in the state. And then by about 2010 or so, we had kind of gotten a lot closer to that equal split as it relates to property, sales and use, and income privilege. But of course, we've kind of continued to gravitate towards a more equal split across those three taxes in recent years. And so with that, I would happily stand for whatever questions you might have on tax facts.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have two questions. The first one, if I may, Mr. Chairman, two questions. The first one's more of an appropriation question. So if you guys don't know the answer off the top of your head, no harm. Just wondering, how much is in the budget stabilization fund currently?
If I were sitting in front of my computer, I could
Okay,
tell you
no
really,
problem.
really
I mean,
quick.
you can give it to me after.
It's less than $2 billion, but more than $1.5 billion.
1.5, okay. And my second question, I'm looking at chart 3 here. Scroll down to, it's under gross receipts, but illegal drugs. Can you explain that tax to me? Is this people paying the tax on their illegal drug purchases? And it's good to see, I guess, that our collections on those taxes have gone down. Maybe illegal drug use has gone down, but.
Yeah, that's a tax that we have on the books that people can make tax stamp purchases, but it's not actually, there's not actually a good reason that somebody would do that. But we have taxes for actually two separate taxes, one for marijuana and one for kind of all other illegal drugs on the books already. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to work this out. So we have people that go and actually buy these these tax stamps.
Tax stamps, yeah.
For their.
And some people who buy them are actually just collectors.
So I mean, that looks like somewhat of a decent amount. I mean, for a couple of years, it looks like we're collecting more off that than dry cleaning taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That kind of sparked my interest. And as we're talking taxes, I know a great way we can raise some revenue and some taxes that have to do with illegal drugs as well. But that's another conversation for another day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Stay tuned for Fed and State, huh? Any further questions, committee? Eddie, I was looking at, I think it was table 5, the detail on the local government data. Does the expanded version of tax facts or perhaps the Department of Revenue have this type of information at the city or county level? We have the aggregate counties and the aggregate cities here. If we wanted to go look and see what our county or our city, the tax balance was, can we find that?
So you can find that in your cities and counties budgets that they publish. The Property Valuation Division of the Department of Revenue publishes information on a county by county basis. And so the county level data is very readily available in their annual report. The cities, what you would actually see is all of the cities lumped together in your individual county, which of course in some counties, you might have a real clear picture right out of the gate. But in Property Valuation Division's annual report, it's kind of all of the cities within Wallace County, all of the cities within Johnson County, all of the school districts within Wallace or Johnson County.
Okay, and then my other question is, I think I know the answer to this, but when we're talking about the state and local taxes, is the 1.5 and the 20 mills that's statutorily levied, statutorily levied, is that accounted for as a local tax? Because technically it is for the school, actually the 1.5 might be the state, but the 20 mills would be included in the local tax?
Yeah, within this data, the 1.5 mills is counted as a state tax and the 20 mills is counted as a school district tax. If you look at Federal Census Bureau data, because of their reporting definitions, that 20 mills actually shows up as state property tax revenue in Federal Census Bureau data. So there's always a little bit of a discrepancy there. Since the state is the one who sets the rate for that tax, they interpret it to be a state tax, even though our statutes direct the local governments to actually levy that. But here it's local on the 20 mills.
All righty, committee, are there any further questions? Won't be the last time you see him up here, but might be the last time today. Seeing no further questions, Eddie, thank you for the thorough presentation. I'm sure we'll all take this home and read it this week, and if we need to get some sleep at night, we can pop this up. But committee, that does conclude our business for the day and actually for the week. We do not have any further meetings scheduled for this week. And Monday is a holiday, so we will see you back here on Tuesday. We're adjourned.